Hello everyone. In this episode, I will tell you how I built an online bookstore using AWS, Stripe, and React. From AWS, I use AWS Amplify library to connect resources at AWS end. So we are going to create an AppSync API as our GraphQL API, and then we will create S3 buckets to store our book images and so on. Now, before I start, I want to tell that I'm not going to cover each and every line of the React code. What I will be covering is how to connect to AWS from React. I will also be covering different relationships like many-to-many relationship between books and orders, and also different authorization mechanisms. For example, the admin users can create books, but unauthenticated like the guest users can only view the books. If they want to check out, they have to log in, but still again, they are not able to create books. That's only for the admins. And finally, I will tell you how I did the checkout part as well, including the payment processing, order creation, etc. You will also learn how I use pipeline resolvers to deal with different custom logics and then create resources or create records in DynamoDB table from within Lambda functions. Well, I'm really excited about this project. So without further ado, let's look at the learnings and the agenda that we are going to cover in this video. And hey, if you're interested about this content, make sure you subscribe to my channel for more videos just like this. So let's start with the product demo. So I'll go through all the pages and the main functionalities, and then let's look at the architecture diagram. And it will contain what resources are we using and how they connect to each other. And then let's start configuring our application, cloning the GitHub repository. Of course, I'll put all the code in the GitHub repository, so you guys can look at the front-end code. And then we will initialize an Amplify project into the React application. Then we are going to add multiple Amplify categories, starting from the authentication, which will handle all the login, sign up, all that part. And then the storage category, where we'll create an S3 bucket to store images. And we will also use function category to create two Lambda functions for pipeline resolvers to handle the checkout functionality. Then we will also be adding the API category, and we'll specifically add a GraphQL API so our front end can communicate with the DynamoDB tables and so on. And then I'll explain the process of processing orders. And once all these resources are synced with the cloud, then we'll look at how we can communicate with them or interact with them from within our front-end React application. Then we'll see how we can verify an order that is placed by the customer from the Stripe dashboard as well as from AppSync console. And finally, we will be deploying our application to S3 as a static website. Now let's have a look at the final product demo. Okay, now this is our online bookstore. It's called Wisdomly. And it has multiple menu points: home, books, cart, and checkout. So in the home page, we can either view all books or see the featured collection right here. So if I open up one of these books, let's say the details section, it will show the title, description, the author, and the price. And also I can add it to the cart. And if I go to the book section, then it will show all the books that I have, including featured and unfeatured ones. And then I have the cart. So at the moment, okay, there's one thing, let me take it out. So it's an empty cart right here. And then we have the checkout page. So checkout page is not loaded unless you sign into the application. And we have a hidden link as well. So that is for admin. So you can go to /admin and then you will be directed to another sign-in page. So here we can log in as an admin and start adding new books to our store. So this is basically the admin section. Let me sign in. Okay, so I can choose a new book. Let's say this one again. I can type the title and the description. Let's add a new description and the author, Napoleon Hill, and the price. Let's say it's 35. Then we can select whether this is a featured book or not. Let's say no, and we can submit it. Well, I haven't cleared the input, but anyways, it will be submitted. Let me sign out and go to home or the books and then do a refresh. Then I should see the new book right here. Now let's add something to our cart. So I'll come here and then I'll add this book Then I can increase the number of books I want to add. You can see the total get updated accordingly. Let me add another one. Let's see this one, Atomic Habits. Okay, added, and another one maybe. Okay, $100 startup. Okay, so now I can check out. So if I click checkout, then I have to log in. So let me log in with the user. So if you haven't signed up, you can click create account and sign up, and then I will sign in. Then I get to the checkout page. I can put the address and then the card number. So right now we have linked the Stripe test account, so the default card number is 42424228 and the CSV 111 and 1212. Okay, something like that. And I'll take a console so you can see the console message. I click submit payment. There you go, order is successful. So now I can go to the Stripe account and see if I get a payment. And here we go, we just got a payment. Now let's look at the architecture diagram. Now it is not a very complex architecture that we have. We'll be using most of the serverless services. Now starting from the front end of our bookstore, we'll be coding it in React library. And the final application, we'll be hosting it on S3 bucket, which has static hosting enabled. Then we also have another S3 bucket to store all the public images. Now these images can be accessed by anybody, authenticated or guest users. Now in the React frontend, we have the Amplify library installed. Now we use Amplify library to connect with our backend. So as our backend, we have an GraphQL API, which is powered by AppSync, and that is going to handle CRUD operations for books, such as admin create books, user read books, etc. Now all these CRUD operations will be handled by VTL templates or velocity templates, and the best part is we never have to write any of these templates because that is automatically being provided by Amplify when we are configuring this API. And not only the VTL template, it will also provide all the queries, mutations, and all these front-end resources to connect with our backend without we having to write any of those codes. And then we have the Amazon Cognito as our main authentication provider. But in this application, we will also be using multi-auth functionality, which we will use both Amazon Cognito as well as Identity and Access Management or IAM to allow guest users to connect to our backend and read the books. And then we have the pipeline resolver that is built to process the payment, so the checkout process. So as soon as a user checks out, then the first Lambda function gets triggered to make the payment or charge the customer. And before charging the customer, it will acquire user details from Cognito, and then only it will charge the customer with more user details. And after the charging is successful, then the next Lambda function takes over and creates the order in DynamoDB table. So this is the serverless architecture that we will be using to create our bookstore. Alright, so now to start, let's first clone our repository. So I'll head over to the GitHub repository, I'll put the link below, and then click code and get the clone URL. I'll make a new directory, my bookstore, and then do a git clone to that directory. cd into that and open it in Visual Studio Code. So in the folder structure, source folder contains all the source code, and then we have a video resources section, and it has different code snippets and other resources which I will use during this video. Next, let's initialize an Amplify project in AWS and connect our project. Now we need to install Amplify CLI, so make sure you install this exact version to avoid any conflicts due to library updates. npm i-g at AWS Amplify CLI at 4.24. So this will install Amplify CLI globally. Now, before initializing an Amplify project, we have to configure Amplify CLI with your AWS account. So let's type Amplify configure. Then you need to sign into your AWS account And after that, you can hit enter. Then you have to pick which region you want to spin up all the resources. I will choose US East 2 and Amplify username. Let me type Amplify Manoj. Click next permission. Administrator access is by default selected. Review and create user. Hit enter again. You have to add the access key and secret access key. I'll add the access key here and I'll add the secret access key of the camera. Okay, hit enter. Then you can provide a profile name. I type YouTube profile. So that set up a new user. Now I will type Amplify init to initialize an Amplify project on AWS. Enter a project name, My Bookstore. Sound good. I'll add the environment name as prod. Let's develop for production directly. And then Visual Studio Code, JavaScript, React, source, distribution is on build. Accept all the defaults. I'll pick the YouTube profile as my AWS profile. With that, we have successfully connected our application to an Amplify project. Next, let's add authentication with AWS Cognito. Type Amplify add auth and accept the default configuration. The defaults are good for our application. Select username for sign in. Now I am done. With that, it will configure a user pool for our application so that our users can log into it. Now as the next configuration, let's create an S3 bucket to store images for our books. Type Amplify add storage. Select content, images, audio, etc. Let's provide a friendly name for this category, book images. Bucket name, I'll accept the default because this has to be unique. Who has access to it? Both auth and guest users. As you have already seen in the demo, even a user who has not logged in should be able to view the books. So let's pick the option both authenticated users and guest users. Hit enter. Now for authenticated user, he should be able to create, read and delete. Now if you remember the admin user who logged in, he can create books. But the other users who logged in cannot create book. We will accomplish that by adding this admin user to an admin group. Hit enter. Then what kind of an access a guest user has? Only the read access is necessary because he should be able to view the books. Hit enter. No Lambda triggers. With that, we have configured the S3 bucket successfully with our application. Next, let's add two Lambda functions to process a book order. Now, when a user adds the required books to the cart and then press checkout, we have to do two things. Number one, we will charge the user using Stripe. And number two, we will create the order and then we will link the order with the books that he requested. To handle these two activities, we'll use pipeline resolvers in AppSync. More on that later. Type Amplify add function. Select Lambda function, a friendly name for this category. Let's call it, this is our first function that will charge the user. So we'll call it process payment. Hit enter. I'll accept the same name for the Lambda function. And then I'll choose Node.js as the runtime for this function. Hit enter. I'll use the hello world template. No. And I don't want any recurring schedules. No Lambda layers for now. I will update the Lambda function a little later. So I'll hit no again. Then let's add our next Lambda function. Amplify add function again. Lambda function, friendly name. Let's say create order. Create order will accept as the same name for the Lambda function. Runtime Node.js, hello world. No, no, no. No again. Now as we are adding these resources, you can see there's a folder automatically created called Amplify. And under that, you will see there's a folder called backend. So in that backend, right now, we have three folders. One for auth, the auth category we configured, the storage category we configured, and the functions. Now here are the two folders for two functions that we created, create order and process payment. Okay, as the next step, let's create a GraphQL API so that our front end, the React application, can communicate with AppSync. Amplify, add API, hit enter. Select GraphQL. My bookstore is fine for the API name. The default authorization type, I will choose Cognito user pool. However, we will be using multi-auth so that we can use Cognito user pool to authenticate our logged in users and then API keys to authenticate our guest users. So let's first select Cognito user pool. And the next questions, don't click no, I am done, or don't select that rather. Select I want to make some additional changes, hit enter. Then the next question asks, do you want to configure additional auth types? Type yes, hit enter. Then select API key with your space bar and hit enter. Then description for the API key, guest user access to books. You can type anything, hit enter. How long is it going to be valid? The API key, I'll put the maximum 365 days. No conflict detection. I don't have, actually I have, but let's copy paste later. Let's choose single object as the example. Do I want to edit it this time? Let's edit it right away. I will go to my video resources and then I should see the schema.graphql. So I'll copy the whole thing and come back here, delete this and paste it. Now this is the schema for our GraphQL API that use AWS AppSync. Now we have multiple types. As you can see, we have book type, book order type, again an order type, and also the mutation types. And these rest are input types. So let's look at the first type, the book order. Now our whole application is revolved around books, right? So for a book, let's add an ID field and it has a title, description, image URL, the author, whether or not it is featured. So that's a flag, Boolean flag, and then the price. I'll get to the connection in a bit. So, but these are the main attributes for a book. And here I'm using the auth directive of Amplify and I have multiple rules configured. The first rule states allow the group admins, so allow all the users in this group to create, update, delete, and do all these things because admins should be able to do any of that. So that's why when I log in with an admin user, I could add and book. But if I'm not part of the admin group, even though I signed in, I cannot do that. Now this is handled through Cognito user pool authentication. Then we have two other rules. One of that is private. An operation is the read. So this means all authenticated users can read the post. So both authenticated users and guest users should be able to read the post. So that's what I added two rules. Allow private as well as allow public. So public as in the guest users who are not authenticated, and we allow them to read so that they can see all the books. So people in the admin group can do whatever, but the others who are authenticated or the guest users can only read the books. Then I'm using another directive called at model. So this directive is going to create a DynamoDB table for this type. So for this book type, it's going to create a table and also it will create the VTL templates, so velocity templates that will handle create, read, delete, and all these CRUD operation. And I pass an attribute or a parameter called subscription null. So this means it is not going to create any subscriptions, but it will create the mutations and the query. So the mutations we can create update, and with queries we can query the books. So we don't need real-time updates, so that's why I set subscriptions to null. Now let's look at our next main type, that is the order. For an order, it has an ID field, and then it has the username, who made that order, and the date of order, the total order, so that is a float, and then we have a connection. We'll get to that in a bit. So then I'll use three directives here. Number one, the model. Again, it is going to create a DynamoDB table for order, just like books, and create all the CRUD operation for that. And then we have auth, and I have two rules. So one of the rules is allow the users in the group admin to do anything. So they can view, they can delete, read, update orders from the users. So there's no restriction for admin users. Then there's another rule. It says allow the owner. That means if there's a user who logged into the application, he could be an admin or he could be a normal user, he can see the orders that he created, but he cannot see the orders that is created by other users. Now both of these rules are handled by Cognito user pool. And when a user logged into the application using Cognito user pool, there's an email field. So I'm using that email field as the identity field for order. Now when we have email as the identity field, we can easily allow our backend functions to create an order for a particular users. Because as you know, before we create an order, we have to do a set of things. We have to charge him and we have to see whether it is successful or not. And then only we will create the order for him. So to handle all that complexities, we use those two Lambda functions. And towards the end, we will create the order for the user by using DynamoDB SDKs. That's where these email fields come handy. Next, we have a @key attribute. So this is we define a secondary index and the index name is by user and we use the user field. Here I'm planning to add the username. So the admins can query users by their username, not only just by using the table primary keys, which obviously the ID. So we have more flexibility to query with this secondary index. And they can in fact type queries, find all the orders of the user whose username starts with, let's say, Manoj. Next, we have the mutation called type. Now, this is the default mutation, and when Amplify converts these types to the full-blown schema, it anyway is going to create the mutations for order, books, and all that. But now we have a custom need. That is, we have to create a new mutation for processing orders. And it is not directly linked with a DynamoDB table also, but we have to run two functions. So it's a custom need. So that's why I'm creating the mutation separately for that. So I call it process order and it will take the input as the process order input. Now it is this one. Now when a user clicks checkout, we will get the full array of his cart items and then the total and the token from Stripe and the address. So we get these as the input and then we will output at the end the order status, whether it is succeed or failed. Now as this data comes in, it will execute two functions sequentially and we call it a pipeline resolver. So in our pipeline, the first function that get called is a process payment, the function we created earlier. And then we have the other function. So this will make sure the Stripe payment is successful if and only if call this create order. So let's add code for these two Lambda functions. I'll go to video resources and then I should see the process payment.js. Let me copy this whole thing, close this, and in the backend I will go to the functions, process payment, and then source folder index. You have a simple handler function. Let me delete that and paste that code. The process payment function is very simple. If I go to the handler function, it will do two things. So it will first get the total price for the order from the input that is passed to this, and then it will charge the customer. So from the event, we can get the arguments, and these fields are extracted from that. And out of that, there's this total. Then I'll use Stripe SDK to charge the user the amount, the total amount in USD currency, then the token of Stripe that is being passed down to this one, and then as description, let's say order, the date, and the email. Now there's a one small thing, guys. We have to get the user's email using Cognito admin API. So that's what this function does. So if I go to this function, user email, so this is that function. We will call the admin get user function with the parameters, the user pool ID and the username. Because the username is passed down to us as the claim, but we don't get the email as the claim. So in order to get the full user context, we have to call this admin get user with these params, of course. And then I'll return the email and this email is here. Then I'll add that as the description. Here I can add the username as well. Let me in fact do that, username with email. So that's about process payment function. Let's go to our video resources and go to create order function and then copy the whole thing. So under function, let's expand the create order source index.js, delete this and paste. So the process order does few things. Now the earlier function and this get called sequentially. So we can pass down some information from the previous function to this. So I will get the order details from the process payment lambda. So that's what this code is all about. I will get event.previous.result. So that will give me all the results that I passed down from the previous function. And then I'm going to create an order. So we will create an order using AWS DynamoDB SDK. So that's what this function does. So it will pass down the payload and create an order. And then we will link the books that he purchased to this order. So that's what this create book order function does. Now there's a many-to-many relationship between orders and books. So that's why we have this type exist. The book order. So this is the third table that handles this many-to-many relationship. When we are defining a many-to-many relationship, we have this third table that handles it. So the book order, it will have two main attributes, the book ID and the order ID. So when we are creating an order from the create order function, we will first create the order and then get the order ID, and then we'll create another record in the book order table. So that will have the order ID of that order. Then we'll create links for each and every book in that order. So order ID, book ID. So if we purchase 3 books, then the same order ID will be there for 3 records, but the book IDs will be different. Now with this connection, we can achieve two things. So one of the things is a user can see his previous orders. So we can provide a feature, which I haven't added it anyway in this demo. A user can view his previous orders because a user can have many orders, right? And in the same time, from the admin panel, you can look up all the orders of all the users or all the orders of a certain user. So that is also possible. Now, in order to set up these relationships, we use the connection directive. Now, the book, it has multiple orders. So it will have multiple book orders. So this is the third table that we are referencing, right? So it will have multiple book orders, and that is the connection. In the same time, a order has multiple books. So that is of again book order, middle function. And when we are resolving it, we are querying these attributes by using the secondary indexes. Now, in order to get all the books for an order, we use the by order this secondary index. To do the other way around, that means to get all the orders for a book, we use by book secondary index right here. Both indexes are defined in the book order type. I hope this is clear. So let's move on. So I'll pull up the terminal again. It's waiting for my command. So let me hit enter. Then that will start executing this GraphQL schema and create that full-blown schema for us. Okay, it is done. Now the next step would be to push all these resources onto AWS so it will create and provision these resources. But before that, we have some dependencies in the Lambda functions which we need to fill up. And I'll go to Amplify, Backend, Functions. Let's first go to Process Payment. So under the source, index.js. As you can see, it uses AWS SDK as one of the dependencies, but this is provided at the Lambda runtime. So it's fine. But we need to fill in the user pool ID and the Stripe private key. I don't have this one yet. So let's do an Amplify push anyways. Now the Amplify push is going to create these resources in AWS. A user pool with our auth category, S3 bucket with our storage category, AppSync API with our API category, and the DynamoDB together with the AppSync as the resolvers, and the two Lambda functions again as part of our API pipeline resolvers. I'll do Amplify push. So after this, I will get an user pool ID. Then I'll update this again. Yes, so all these are yet to create. My two function, S3 bucket, auth, the user pool, and the AppSync API. Now I want to generate the code so I can easily use my API from frontend. I don't have to write any code. Say yes, I want it in JavaScript. In these folders, queries, mutations, and subscription. Yes, I want them. And how deeply it is nested, let's use 4 because in future we may add more nested queries. All right, so now it is successful and it took me about 3 minutes to complete this whole process. Now let's understand the two functions that process a book order. Let me close all these windows. Now in source folder, I should find a file called AWS export.js. Let me copy this user pool ID there and go to Amplify function, process payment, and replace this placeholder with that. Then I need a Stripe private key. For that, you need to create a Stripe account. Go to stripe.com and then sign up for an account. And in the dashboard, you will see get your test API keys. So from our React frontend, we will use the public key to generate a Stripe token. Then that token will be passed down to our Lambda function. Then we will use a secret key to make a charge for the user. So first I will copy the public key and then let's first update the front end. For that, you go to source and pages, check out, and there's another place folder for the public key. Save it. Then I'll view the secret key, copy that, go to the Lambda function, and here I will paste it. By the way, you should use your own private and public key because I'm going to remove this account. So the payment process dependencies are now complete. Let's go to create order function dependencies. Source, event index.js, and there I have to install GUID or UUID. So I'll right click, open in terminal, then let me type npmi UUID. Now since this function create orders in the DynamoDB table directly, we have to pass the order table and the book order table. So that will create the link between book and the order. So how to find that? So take another new terminal and then type Amplify console. So that will open your Amplify project in AWS automatically. Choose the correct region. This is it. I click onto that. Then here go to backend environment and then I'll click the prod environment I created. Then I see the categories I have added. Can go to API and under that I get all the data sources, the table names. So I need the book table name and the book order table name. So I'll click view here that will open up the DynamoDB table. So this is the order table. So let me copy this order table name, replace the placeholder. Then I need the book order table. So this is the book order table. Copy, paste it, save. Okay, with that, I'm going to run another Amplify push. So this time it will update only these two functions. As you see, update is only for these two functions, everything else is not changed. So it will be much quick. Now, hey, one other additional thing. When you are storing these strings, this because this private key is very sensitive. You can use SSM or parameter store and then refer this parameter store variable here. Or else you can use the secret manager as well. So with that, we have successfully configured all our resources on cloud. Okay, now that we have spent much time on configuring the application, let's run the app with the current configuration. Clear the screen. Let's run npm install to install the dependencies for our front end. In the package JSON, we have a bunch of dependencies to be installed. Let me run npm I or npm install. That will install all the dependencies. Okay, now let's start our application by running npm run start. Here we go, it opens up our application, but we don't have any books. No featured books, no books, cart is empty, everything. So why not we create some books from the admin section? Go to admin/admin and let's create an admin user. So let's create a normal user first and we'll make him an admin. I'll use 10 minutes email to get a temporary email box. Put that email address here, fake phone number, create account. Let me see if I get an email right away. And this is the verification ID. Copy that, paste, confirm. Great. Now we are in the add new book section. So let's add a book. I'll click choose file. Let's add this one. Paste some description, author, Let's make it a feature book. Now before I submit, let's take a console and inspect it. Network, and I'll hit submit. I don't see anything now. So let's go to our project, go to our admin page. So under pages, we have admin. So this is the admin component. So on top, we are requiring React and also use state for keeping some states. And then we import some Amplify dependencies. So one of those dependencies is this create book mutation. When we do Amplify push, it's going to create all the mutations, queries, and subscription in JavaScript for us. And those files are in this GraphQL folder. You see, we have mutation, we have queries. But in my file, I'm referencing a mutation file in API folder, which is here. So at the moment, it has nothing. Queries, it is empty. Why I'm doing that? Because this GraphQL folder is always being replaced as and when I do an update. So I want to keep it constant and have more control over it. So that's why I'm referencing a different directory. But now let's go to mutation in the GraphQL folder, copy that and go to this API folder mutation, save it. Similarly, queries, copy this and queries, paste it. Now my previous data is anyway not here, so let me add it quickly. Let's try submitting again. And I'm getting an error in creating to-dos. So let's observe this error. So I get an error called unauthorized. Now as you remember, the creation of books is only allowed for admin. So we sign up a user, but he's not an admin. So let's create him an admin. So I'll take another terminal. Let's go to Amplify console. Click on Authentication. Then I can view my users in the user pool. Click this user pool button. Pick the region. So click on my user pool here. Then I get number of users 1. So I'll go to users. So this is our admin user. So now I go to groups and then create a new group. I call this group admin. So it has to match exactly the word or the string that we gave in our schema file. Admin user groups to create books. I don't have to select a role, but precedence are set as 0. So the lesser the precedence, more priority is given. So this is basically if I am part of multiple groups, which group should be prioritized. So then I'll create the group, go into that. Then I'll add the user. I'll click the admin user again. So don't get confused. My group name is also admin. The username is also admin. But this username could be anything. So now let's go back and clear the screen and try submitting. Oh, before that, I have to sign out. Then only it will take effect. Login again. Okay, now I go to the bottom and click submit. So this time it should be successful and I don't get any error. The create book is now successful. So I'll refresh and add another book because I haven't implemented this clearing up feature, which I will do in upcoming day. So let me add another file or book rather. Submit it. It is successful. So we have 2 books. So I think that should be enough. So let's go to home. I have to do a refresh. But even though I don't see any books returned to me. Right now I'm not an authenticated user because I signed out. But why is it not showing? So let's inspect the query that triggers in the home page. So it is basically list book query and I'm getting an error. So I get unauthorized error. And if I further look into this, there's something unauthorized in the book orders connection. So let's look at that query. So I will go to home page, under pages, go to home, and I'm using the context API here. So I have a context for book. So the book context. So that is there inside the context folder. So right here, and this is the book context. In the book context, we are fetching books. And once we fetch the book, we set the featured books in a separate array and all the books in a separate array. So our components that use this context can refer either of it. But however, in order to get the books, it is using this list books query. So if I go to queries, so that is list books. Now this all looks fine except for one thing. So that is this orders. Now an unauthenticated user can only look at the books, read the books. This orders attribute or the fields are coming from our connection with the order type or the table, but they are not authorized to view it. That's why it is saying unauthorized. This field is unauthorized, but everything else is authorized for him. So what I will do is I will remove this and save it. And this is one of the advantage that we can reap when we have these queries and mutation outside this automatically updating folder. So that's why I put it in a separate folder in the first place. So now let's look at it. And as you can see, it is loaded. Very nice. But there's another problem. My images are not loading. So let's go back to our Amplify console. And this time let's go to file storage. And here in the file storage, so I will view my bucket in S3. And when we upload book images, so it has uploaded into a folder called public, and inside that there's another folder called images. Then we have these three images. In order for an unauthenticated user to view the books, we have to add the public permission for this folder. With Amplify storage, there are three levels of folders: public folder, private, and protected. Public is for everybody to see, but still again we have to add some permission to this, since we are using the API key authentication to request these resources. So what I will do here is I will go to permissions and go to bucket policy, and I'll go to the documentation links right beneath it. And then there's a link to policy examples. And this page, if I scroll a little bit down, I'll get grant read-only permission to anonymous users. So I'll copy this policy, come back to my console S3 and paste it in. Here, instead of the example bucket, I will replace it with the exact bucket name is this. Paste it out. And I don't want the public access to the entire folder, only to the public folder, and inside that there's a images folder. So you get this message, bucket has public access, but it only has public access to this folder. So I will go back to my Wisdomly app and then do another refresh. We'll see if the images are now loading. So as predicted, now the images loads. Next, let's look at how we have actually connected our front end to our backend. Now we already seen some of these API calls to the backend, but let's look at in page wise. So I'll close all these files and I will go to the pages folder. Now here in the home folder, we display featured products. So we use the context book context here in the context, which is the book context, and we are passing this featured book list to our context, thereby from within our components we can require it. The featured books is nothing but we get all the books using fetch books, and then we set the featured books to featured by filtering them by the featured flag, the Boolean value. So it's that simple. In the books page, we use books instead of featured. So we'll get the whole list of books. Now both of these pages are public. Even the cart page is also public. But when you look at the checkout page, it is not public. You have to log in. So that's where we use this Amplify Authenticator, and that comes from Amplify UI React library, which got installed when we did npm install. And from there's a component Amplify Authenticator. We just have to wrap it around our component. Then you will get that nice little login screen. So in the same time, if I go to the admin, here also we are wrapping the return value or the return JSX using the Amplify Authenticator. Thereby we get the login screen. I think that's all to it. I think the rest is quite explanatory. When we want to make an API call, we get the API component from AWS Amplify, and then we'll use amplify.graphql. Then we use this helper function GraphQL operation, and we get the corresponding mutation from our API mutation, and then we'll pass down the input parameters. That's it. I mean, it's very easy to make an API call using Amplify because everything is generated for you, especially these mutations and queries. Next, let's create an order and see if it is properly processed. So in my localhost, I'll select 10x rule and add that to the cart. Let's increase it 3 times I need 3 of these books, and then I'll go to startup, again one of these. The order total is $63.85. Then I'll click checkout. So I have to log in order to check out, and I only have the admin user. So let's create another user. So I get a new email address and paste that in, create account. Let's check. There you go. And the verification code, paste, confirm. Now in the checkout component, we have a place to enter the shipping address and then the Stripe component. By the way, let me quickly show you how I linked it. If I go to pages and checkout, and you see I'm using Stripe elements from Stripe React library. For this element, I am passing the public key as a attribute. And then I have this checkout form, which is under component. So in this component, I'm using the other elements, the card element, use Stripe and those things. So it will properly show the card element or the place to enter the card details, which is this one. So let's try to add address and then the card. By default, it is 424242. This can be anything. And I'll click submit payment. In the order, I get an error. It says couldn't find the module Stripe. I think we haven't installed one of those dependencies. Let's install that real quick. Amplify backend, open it in terminal, npmi Stripe. Let's save it as well. I'll do another Amplify push. It's updated, so let's try again. Clear everything and then create another payment. Again, there's an error. So this time I have a different error. So if you can see the hover text, it says this Lambda function is not authorized to perform Cognito admin get user. Well, that is right because we haven't provided any permission to this function to call Cognito to get admin user. So let's do that. So let's provide the permission. Amplify console, backend environment, functions, the process payment. I will click view in Lambda so I can see the role that is currently attached to this, and then I can add that additional permission to it. And here's the code, and in the permission tab, this is the role that is attached. So I'll click onto this, then it will open that role in identity and access management, and I'm going to add an inline policy for that. Click inline policy, choose the service Cognito and Cognito user pool because we are getting a user from the Cognito user pool, and read, I will select the permission admin get user because that's what we are doing. And which user pool? So let's click on to this, and then I have to add the ARN of the user pool. So let's take that. I will go to the user pool, which I have opened into another tab. I will go to general settings, then here I will get the ARN. Copy that, go back to that file, click add ARN, paste it, then click add, review policy, create, and that is been attached. In the same time, we have another Lambda function, that is create order. And this create order Lambda function, so it is connecting to DynamoDB. And we have not provided any permission to interact with DynamoDB as well. So let's add that permission as well. So I'll go to Amplify console again and go back to my bookstore, backend environment, again functions, select the second function here, view in Lambda. So this is the Lambda code, permission tab. This is the role that is currently attached to it. So do you see we don't have any permission for DynamoDB. This time instead of an inline policy, I will attach an managed policy. I'll search for DynamoDB. So this time I'll add the full access to DynamoDB. Of course, you can add the granular access only for those two tables. I'll leave it to you. But here I'll add the full access. And I think that should do it. So let's come back and let's try to run this again. Let's see if we get the order successful message, hopefully. Submit payment. I get another error. Well, I'll click that once again. Then it says the order is successful. It takes just a little bit to propagate that permission. So that is understandable. So now my order is successful. Very nice. So how do we verify whether my order is successful? We can do it in two ways. Number one, we can go to our Stripe and see if there's a payment. So in my cart, there should be a payment for 63.85. I'll go to Stripe dashboard and payments tab, and here we go, 63.85. So we receive the payment. That means our first Lambda function charging the user is properly done. In the second Lambda function, it will do two things. First, it will create the order, then it will create the links to the books of that order. Let's go to Amplify and I'll go to API again. Then I'll select view the API, the AppSync API, so we can run some queries and see exactly those tables are updated. Let's go to data sources and then directly look at the table first. So in the order table, we should have an order record. So I'll open it in a new tab and here we have the record. So the order is there and 63.85 the total. And the customer email is added. So that's because we set up the identity field as the email. Cancel that. And then we'll go to book orders. There should be two book orders because we had two orders. Let me quickly show you 1 and 2. So these two books, so there are two records for the same order ID and different two book IDs. 79 is the order ID 04 and the other one different order ID 06 but same order ID 04. Well, with this we can run some nice queries. So I'll go to AppSync console again, then go to queries. I have to log in with a user. So this time I will log in with the admin user. I have to provide the client ID. So and go to source AWS export.js. Then we can find the client ID here, copy, paste it here. Then the admin user, login, clear everything. I'll go back to my video resources and example GraphQL. I'll use this query to list all orders. So it's going to list all orders, and in each and every order, it will go into the books of that order and it will print out the list of books. So let me run that. There you go. So we get the order and the books that is included in that order. So in the same time, we can filter it by the customer. So let's look at this query. So it's the same query, but with a filter attribute. You see the same one, but we are adding the filter. Let's say this time it's not Manoj Fernando. So this is Andrew and hit enter. Well, I don't see the Andrew user and that's strange. So let's go to our DynamoDB table for order and we'll see if there's a user column and I don't see it. And let's go to our Stripe dashboard and we'll see if there's a user mention. No, it is undefined. There's something to do with the username. Let's try to debug it. Go to Amplify folder, create order, index.js, and we should get the username here. But apparently it is not passed. Let's go to the previous function where the username is passed down to this one. So that is process payment source index.js. Well, in the handler function, we are trying to access the username from arguments.input, and this is the error. The username is not inside the arguments.input. Instead, it is in the claims. So this is where it is. Let me take out the username here because you don't get the username, and add const username and paste this one. I'll take out the username part so it will destructure properly. Format it. Now it should do it. So I'll take console and then do an amplify push again. Okay, it's updated. So let's check that again. So I will increase the order, let's say 180, 107.85. Submit payment. Order is successful. Let's go to the Stripe dashboard to the payments again. And there we go, 180, 107.85. And this time we get the user Andrew. So that means if I go to the query that I previously ran and I run it again, then I should get the order. Now these are the books for Andrew's order. Well, now we got everything working except we haven't hosted this application. So let's use Amplify itself to host it. let's look at the query that an admin can write to get all the orders of a user. Now host this application with Amplify. There are multiple ways. One, we can link a proper CI/CD pipeline, with different environment, test, QA, and production environment. And then you can use custom domains for each environment as well. Or else we can simply use an S3 and CloudFront to host this application as a one environment. So we'll use the second one. In fact, we'll not use CloudFront as well, just S3 bucket. So I'll go to my bookstore, add a new category, Amplify Add Hosting. I'll choose the second option, CloudFront and S3. So I'll use the dev environment, that is only S3. Hosting bucket name, I'll accept the default index.html as our main page, and then I'll do Amplify Publish. So I think this is all it. It should give out an URL to an S3 bucket, which is configured to be host and static website. Then we can view application on cloud. Okay, now it is published successfully. So it has opened up the website for me, and you can see it is all here. And it is not on my local machine, but on S3. So I can add, can check out. Of course, I have to log in, and it's all here. So this is what I want to cover in this video. And hey, if you're interested about this content, make sure you subscribe to my channel for more videos just like this.